All right, let's dive into a really fascinating and honestly pretty mind-bending new theory about where our consciousness, that feeling of being you, actually comes from. And just a heads up, it's probably not where you think it is. So, let's just start with this fundamental question. Where does your consciousness live? When you're thinking, when you're feeling, when you're experiencing the world, what part of your brain is actually running the show?
For the longest time, the scientific answer seemed pretty obvious. It had to be the cortex, right? That big, wrinkly outer layer of the brain. It's the newest part, evolutionarily speaking, and it handles all our high-level thinking. So it just made sense that our awareness would be located there too.
But what if that's just a huge misconception? What if for all these years, scientists have been looking for the source of our awareness in completely the wrong place? Let's dig into why that might actually be the case.
You know, the classic way of thinking about the brain is kind of like one of those Russian nesting dolls. You've got the newest, smartest, most sophisticated part, the cortex, on the outside. And then as you go deeper, you find the older, more basic, more primitive parts nestled inside.
And that brings us to this radical new theory. A Cambridge neuroscientist, Dr. Peter Coppola, is basically flipping that whole picture on its head. He's arguing that the real seat of consciousness isn't in that new, shiny outer layer at all, but deep inside the brain's ancient core.
So to get this, you really have to see the brain in two parts. You have the cortex, the new brain, which handles all the complex stuff, thinking, reasoning, language. But then you have the subcortex, what people sometimes call the lizard brain. And that part, that handles the raw feelings, hunger, fear, pleasure. It's the difference between thinking about being happy and just feeling happy. And here is the absolute bombshell. Dr. Coppola's argument is that this primal lizard brain isn't just some background system. He says it's the actual foundation of our conscious experience, that raw, basic feeling of being alive. The cortex, in his view, might just be a fancy add-on. Now that is a huge claim to make, so you have to wonder, how did he get there? Well, let's follow the clues, because he's pieced together some incredible evidence from over a century of research.
As Dr. Coppola himself says, the evidence is pretty striking. He thinks the oldest parts of our brain are all you really need for a basic, fundamental awareness to exist. So let's look at the three main lines of evidence he's talking about.
It really all boils down to three key areas of investigation. Studies that involve stimulating the brain, some really tragic cases of human brain damage, and some, well, pretty extreme animal experiments.
Okay, clue number one, brain stimulation. So scientists can use tiny electric currents to activate specific parts of the brain. And when they do this to the cortex, yeah, it can change what you see or what you hear. But when they stimulate the deep brain, wow, things get way more dramatic.
I mean, just look at the power of these effects. Stimulating this deep brain area can instantly plunge someone into depression. It can wake a monkey completely up from anesthesia, or it can knock a mouse out cold. We're not talking about small tweaks in perception here. These are fundamental shifts in the entire state of consciousness.
Clue number two comes from looking at cases of brain damage. And the contrast is stark. If the cortex is damaged, it can change someone's personality or abilities for sure. But when those deep, primal brain regions are damaged, it's often catastrophic. It can completely switch off consciousness, leading to a coma or even death.
But maybe the most powerful, and frankly shocking piece of evidence, comes from an incredibly rare condition called hydranencephaly. It's where children are born without most of their cerebral cortex. Now, according to the old theory, these children should be completely unaware, in a vegetative state. But they're not. And this just nails the point home. Despite missing the very part of the brain that was supposed to create consciousness, these kids show obvious signs of it. They get upset, they play, they recognize people, they clearly enjoy listening to music. So their awareness has to be coming from somewhere else, from that intact, primal lizard brain. This amazing human evidence then points us to our final clue, which comes from animal studies. In some pretty old experiments, researchers actually removed the neocortex from animals like rats and cats, and the result was just astonishing. The animals could still show emotion, groom themselves, raise their young, and even learn new tricks. Their core awareness, it was still there, even without the thinking part of their brain. Okay, so we've looked at the stimulation studies, the brain damage cases, the animal experiments. Where does all of this leave us? Well, this new way of thinking has some seriously profound implications for what it even means to be aware. Which of course leads to a really important question.
If the lizard brain is creating this basic feeling of being alive, then what is our big, fancy cortex even for?
The theory suggests that the cortex is kind of like an expander, or a superprocessor. It takes that raw, fundamental signal of consciousness from the lizard brain and then adds all the complex layers that make us feel so uniquely human. Language, reason, planning for the future, and that whole complicated story we call our self. And that brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from this entire idea. If these ancient, deep brain structures are all you need for basic awareness, then consciousness might be way older and way more common across the animal kingdom than we ever dared to imagine.
The implications here are just huge. I mean, this could totally change how we care for patients in vegetative states, who might have an inner world we just can't see. It could completely reframe the whole debate on animal rights and awareness, and it really, really changes our understanding of our own place in the world.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. If basic awareness isn't some special high-level feature of the human brain, but a deep, ancient, and fundamental part of biology itself, how does that change the way you see the world and every single living thing in it?